Everyone, welcome to the Arena Decklists YouTube page. We are currently streaming this live on Twitch, but we're obviously going to post all this stuff to YouTube for those who missed it. And announcement day is here. Not only did we have a ban and restricted announcement update with Field of the Dead getting banned and Arkham's Astrolabe getting banned in Pauper, although we're probably not going to talk about that very much. We also have the Pioneer format that was announced, and we're going to be making a video on that later. But first and foremost, Field of the Dead.
It gone. That's it. No more Field of the Dead. Probably a good thing, I think, for the long-term health of Standard. Even if I thought this metagame started to get figured out, I think just this is a ban, in my eyes, that's in line with a Sensei's Divining Top ban, where it's just like not a good mechanical thing to have around for a long period of time. Not a very fun thing to play against either.
It depends on what side of things you're on, I suppose.
Okay. I mean, I enjoy playing with Field of the Dead a lot. I try and be generally cognizant of what my opponent is feeling
Yes.
while the game is
Yeah.
going on, and I think they felt a lot of misery for the most part, so I think that should probably be tempered to some extent.
No, you're absolutely right. And Ian Duke, who did the write-up for the announcement, also mentioned that there were a lot of instances of rounds going to time, and we saw that a lot in SCG Philly, where like Standard was the format where all the draws were occurring.
Right.
And that is obviously very problematic. And you can make the argument that given time, people would have figured out how to be faster and like not even just like making decisions, but also mechanically with what they're doing and everything. But I think it was still going to be a problem no matter what. So that, coupled with the fact that it is oppressive, it does lock out a bunch of different archetypes from actually competing in Standard. It takes too long. It has a very high win rate despite being like the known best deck. All these problems kind of combined just means that Field of the Dead had to go. And now we have people in our chat talking about how Oko has doubled in price.
Mm-hmm.
And now we might have another problem on our hands, potentially.
So, I mean, I just have to cut you off here. Look, this has to stop somewhere. Like, we can't just spend all of our time going from ban discussion to ban discussion. It's not realistic. And this started day one of the format. It started after Fandom Legends, that tournament I won. Within a few days, people were saying, uh-oh, Field of the Dead probably should go. This is bad. And then there was the first event on release date for SCG Philadelphia. And at that tournament, all everyone talked about was Field of the Dead should go. This is problematic. And it has continued on to this point. And now, already, here we go. Oko talking about banning that card. And, like, in this instance, with Field of the Dead, I understand why we got to this place, and we contributed to this. I mean, I put out a video on YouTube talking about my thoughts for upcoming bans. I was leaning into the discourse, and I think I had to, given the fact that Wizards moved up the ban and restricted date. I think it amounted to, like, content malpractice if I didn't acknowledge the fact that something was probably going to change. But now that this has happened, can't we just spend some time with this format? Like, you know better than anyone, there's ripple effects that come with the absence of Field of the Dead from the format. And yes, Oko is incredibly powerful. Yes, it's problematically strong. But with Field of the Dead not occupying so much of the available play area, maybe there actually are effective countermeasures to Oko. And whether that proves true or not, calling for a ban without exploring those options seems very, very poor to me.
Yes. So two things. First, something has to be the best.
Right.
That's always going to be the case.
Right.
And if you ban Oko, then it's like, okay, well, maybe Simic is still good with Nissa in Hydroid Crisis. And it's like, oh, ban Crisis. No, stop. You have to stop somewhere.
You have to stop.
And also, like you said, Oko is probably going to be the best thing, right? But like there is going to be space for a lot of other decks to actually exist in this format, and there are going to be things that are going to be good against Simic. We even saw at MC5 where there were decks that were good against Golos, right? On Goldfish, they posted all of the matchup data that you can just go and look at, and Bant Golos, I think, won 48% of its matches or something. There's only one in the top 8, et cetera, et cetera. But there were still a lot of issues with Field of the Dead being legal in Standard that I think needed addressing. And the second thing is in our Discord, we basically have a no ban talk rule because it is not helpful. So right now, Field of the Dead has been banned. We have a standard format with a bunch of tournaments coming up. Yes, we know when the next BNR date is, but from now until then, talking about it doesn't matter.
Yes.
All you can do is just be like, yeah, Oko is probably the best thing. It is almost certainly going to be the most popular thing. How do we exploit that? Where do we go from here? That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, and in the absence of a best thing, you often see people complain, "Oh, there's nothing to focus on." Like that was the complaint about Modern for a long time. It was I didn't know where to focus my sideboard, or there was no rules of engagement for Modern. It could be anything. So now we know what we have to deal with. It's Oko. It's the best card in Standard, maybe the best card in Modern, maybe the best card in Legacy, probably the best card in this new format. That's fine. That's all fine. But at least we know it. At least we take steps to figure out how we're going to deal with that.
Exactly. So where do we go? Where do you want to start? Say you had Fandom Legends next week or whenever the BNR gets updated onto Arena.
Do you know? I think you already know what my answer is, right? I feel like you feel it in your soul.
In my soul. Oh, it's time to dance.
It's time to dance. It's time to play Esper Dance again. Look, that's a deck that showed up, and again, people talked about banning cards from that deck after I won that tournament too. So to just tell you how insane people are, but week one, I farmed these green decks. Now, granted, they were not in the refined state they presently are in, but the play pattern of Doom Foretold into well, I should say the play pattern of Discard Spell into Doom Foretold into Dance of the Manse plays very, very effectively around this green flood the board strategy. You force your opponent into this very, very complicated corner where they have to pressure you through Nissa, but extending too hard into Nissa allows you to Kaya's Wrath, and if they don't go ahead and make Elks via the Oko to stave off the Doom Foretold, then Doom Foretold eats Oko itself, and then you Wrath into those Elks, and basically their resources are hyper-restricted. You're able to go ahead and play Thought Erasure to mitigate some of their game plan. And that was by far the most effective strategy I've found for mitigating these green decks early on in the format. And Field of the Dead closed a lot of that out. You just couldn't answer those things. So I think there is potential for that deck to shine. Now, having said that, I also think there's potential countermeasures to that deck out of the Bant decks. But you got to start somewhere, and you have to at least pressure them to make those adjustments.
Right, and if Dance is a deck that now gets to exist, they have to dedicate a lot of the same slots that they did for things like Field of the Dead, which means that they have fewer slots towards dedicating towards like Mono Red or Knights or Selesnya Adventures. Like that deck actually does beat up on Simic, right?
Yeah, another great point.
So we have the tools in this format for there to be like actual churn within the format, which was not really the case when Field of the Dead was legal.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Green White Adventures is another place I would have gone very quickly. In my experience, I murdered all those green blue white decks very effectively and couldn't beat anything else. Just folded to absolutely everything else. So if the format is about those decks, then you have some counterplay to it. You can head to Green White Adventures and find some good matchups that way. It wouldn't be my first choice, but if things get really out of hand, it's certainly a reactive countermeasure. Whereas this pillar of Field of the Dead was closing off so many countermeasures to so many other things.
Right. So you're going to start with Dance. I think everyone else is going to start with Simic. If a lot of people start with Simic, then I think Selesnya Adventures is a good place to be. We called Canister's Golgari Adventures deck to be very good at MC5, and that was largely a bust. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that had to do with a very poor Simic matchup. And you and I played in a live PTQ last weekend, and I played Golgari Adventures like probably 20 cards different than Canister's list. And I think I figured out some ways to help the Simic matchup, but it is still very, very bad.
Right.
So not necessarily recommend that as a place you could go, but there's a lot of other things too, like Knights. Knights had a very good record against Simic also.
Okay. And, I mean, we have to at least mention the champ, right? Javier Dominguez wins the entire MC playing Gruul. You and I both hated this deck going into the tournament, and I think we said, what is Javier doing? And
its numbers were bad.
Its numbers were bad, and I think after Javier submitted it, there was some group chat text messages circulating around where he was like, "What am I doing? Why did I do this to myself?"
Yes.
So sometimes things just break your way, and when you're quite possibly the best player in the world, you can find some wins where other people would not. On the whole, any belief in Gruul as a real deck going forward? I mean, its role was to farm Field of the Dead, right? And we questioned even that to some extent. But if you take away that best matchup, I don't really know how Gruul contends going forward. It's a deck with some pretty real fundamental flaws.
Yeah, so looking at the matchup data on Goldfish, Gruul aggro had a 40%, 41% win rate in MC5, went 50-50 against Bant Golos in 8 matches, did beat Golos Fires 2-0.
Huge
And
sample
then,
size.
yeah, went 0-4 against Simic, 0-2 against Bant Food, 0-2 against Bant Ramp. So, yeah, just like actual goose egg against Oko decks.
Right. And I would
So,
expect that to be the case going forward.
yeah, maybe not that polarizing, right? But if you want to talk like 25 to 40% matchup, like yeah, that sounds maybe about right. But yeah, like 0-8, that's pretty bad. But I don't think it's that bad realistically. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, any sort of green deck that does not have Oko, Nissa, Krasis, like you might be able to get slightly ahead in the early game, but they are able to stabilize. They do a pretty good job of that, and going long, they're just going to bury you.
No, absolutely right. I see in chat right now folks talking about an individual card, which I think bears mention as we head into this new format. Noxious Grasp. Noxious Grasp should just be everywhere. One of the reasons why I am interested in Esper Dance is that my early versions actually had no copies of Noxious Grasp. I think playing 4 copies would make the matchup even more swingy in your favor, give you more counterplay options to what they're going to do in response. Like I assume Tamiyo is the thing that they do. Noxious Grasp is a clean answer to Tamiyo at +2 mana, which is always really good to find. So I want to see where that card can slot. Some of the interesting homes I've seen for it circulating around. I know Felix Slew working on basically green, blue, black setups. So Sultai using the food enabler from those colors. I don't remember what it's called. The green, black, 3/3. When it attacks, you get a food. You can sack 2 foods to draw a
Yeah,
card.
yeah, like Savvy Hunter or something like that.
I think that's correct. Yeah. So using that card. Also, though, I think more importantly, access to Grasp seems incredibly promising. It's quite frankly a main deck card at this juncture. You need to find a reason not to play it in your main deck, and then you can start adjusting.
Yeah, there were decks last season like Martin Juza's Jeskai Fires Cavalier deck that main decked Aether Gust.
Yep.
And I think that card is a little bit more main deckable because against things like mono red and knights, you have a few extra targets. And between green and red, I think that covered every single deck at the MC, if you want to count like the Aristocrats deck having like Mayhem Devil or whatever.
Right.
But Noxious Grasp, I think, is a little bit more likely to be dead if that actually matters.
Maybe.
But obviously,
I mean, not right now. I mean, when all the focus is just like when everyone's yelling ban Oko, obviously that is the focal point of the format to start.
But there's still going to be stuff like mono red where
Sure.
it is actually just dead, right? Which is kind of problematic. And if you want to talk about things like wilderness reclamation, right? Like Aether Gust can at least tag a reclamation or an expansion explosion. Noxious Grasp largely dead against them. So if you're looking for a little bit of extra power, by all means, like play Grasp, because I do think it's going to hit like 70% of the decks, if not more. But if you want a card that is like a main deckable sideboard card, but is not as powerful as Grasp, but is going to hit more things like 90 to 95% of decks, I think you can look at Aether Gust. But yeah, very much. I do think that both of those cards have main deck potential going forward. I do worry for the black deck's sake, just running headfirst into Veil of Summer in post-board games against Simic. It is definitely a very backbreaking card when that exchange actually gets to happen.
It is. I will continue to assert the Teferi problem with Veil of Summer, and Teferi does
Of course.
do a job mitigating that, but it's painful.
I'm saying, like, from Esper's point of view, it's fine, right? Because you have things like Teferi, but in any other sort of deck, like if you're playing Golgari Adventures or the Rakdos Sacrifice deck or whatever, main decking Noxious Grasp, like when you're playing a black deck against Simic and they get to side in like 3 Veil of Summers, it's not good. You might have like a decent game one shot, but then post board you just have to try and play around that card, and it's so tough because your best cards are the things that kill Oko and kill Krasis, kill Nissa, whatever.
Yeah, I definitely grew to appreciate Veil of Summer. Like there was points where I was less concerned about having Veil of Summer for the control matchups because of Teferi, but just always jamming it against any kind of black removal setup. Murderous Rider, being able to hit that with Veil of Summer is just huge. You think about how much advantage you gain. You get your card, you prevent the body from Murderous Rider coming back. Just a huge swing in your favor.
Right. No, I definitely agree. So a lot of weirdness probably going to happen in the next couple weeks because I know a lot of people are going to mostly be focusing on Simic and decks that beat Simic, how to tune Simic to beat the mirror and everything. And then I think that kind of opens the door for people to just clean them up with knights.
Whenever things are in flux, being super aggressive often pays dividends. I saw someone tweet, if you want to farm the new format on Moto for the next week, just sit there and play the best version of Mono Red, and you'll kill everyone doing nonsense. In what is it called? I keep wanting to call it Frontier. Please tell me the
Pioneer.
Pioneer. I'm never going to get that right under any circumstances. If you want to farm Pioneer, just play Mono Red. There's kind of some of that principle going on, except Oko prevents you from playing Mono Red in a lot of ways. So something like Grixis makes a lot of sense, or something like Mardu. Any kind of knight setup with some counterplay is a way to go in these early days.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those games, like those matches, are dependent on how many Wicked Wolves the Simic deck draws, because it's such a backbreaker, huge tempo stealer, and everything. So if you are playing Simic or Bant or whatever, play 4 Wicked Wolves. Like, what are you doing? It's going to be the best card. There's even against Dance, right? Like, tell us how good Wicked Wolf was actually against you.
It was problematic. I mean, I had no setup for it whatsoever. Like, I was hyper reliant on Doom Foretold. It was often the scariest card I had to play against. And even in spots where, like, there were more immediately threatening cards, I would often have to Thought Erasure Wicked Wolf because I had no long-term plan for it. And I just needed to find other ways to deal with the more pressing problems right now, because if the game went long, which it's always going to do against Esper, I was going to lose to the Wicked Wolf anyway. So you can account for that. There's certainly good cards to play against Wicked Wolf, but until people play those cards, punish them. Wicked Wolf is absolutely absurd.
It's basically good against everyone.
Yeah.
So unless your plan hinges specifically on going over the top of your opponent and not doing like those mid-rangey things, then I just don't see a reason to not play 4 copies of that card. But I also don't think like any sort of like go big plan is very good right now, especially with this list of decks that I'm looking at that I think are going to be quite good. A lot of them are just aggressive decks, and like
Yeah.
you just want 4 wolves in those matchups.
I want to get to that in a second. I have some thoughts about how we could go big. But one other point I wanted to make while we're talking about Wicked Wolf, the card that's been competing with Wicked Wolf for that slot for a long time has been Questing Beast. And now that Field of the Dead is gone, what do you see for Questing Beast going forward? It's obviously a less important part of the format, but is it still just good enough on rate that it needs to merit consideration in all these decks?
It is still good, obviously, and I mean there are enough 3 mana planeswalkers where having that to actually help pressure them does matter, but it all depends on like what kind of setups you're actually trying to have in your Simic decks. Like if you find that you need a little bit of extra clock and reach and ways to turn the corner and stuff, then Questing Beast is good. But I think it might just go back to being like, a 2 of in the main deck or something, because there's not something specifically that you want it for.
That was my thought as well. Definitely my setup for the new Simic food list I'm working on: 4 Wicked Wolf, 2 Questing Beasts. And if you force me to play more, I will play more, but I think just in a vacuum, Wicked Wolf is the stronger card.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, last weekend at the PTQ, I played 4 Questing Beasts and 3 Vivian Arcbow Ranger. Obviously, that's a very good combo, and that could be something that actually ends up slotting into Simic, because Trample Death Touch is huge, and Vivian just gives you such a huge board presence and can also shoot down planeswalkers and creatures and stuff like that. But that is, again, more of like a smaller, like aggro mid-range thing, more of like the late game mid-range thing that Simic is now with like Nissa and Hydroid Crisis. So I think for the most part, normal Simic decks will go over the top of that, but there's a time and a place for that combo.
I see this question in chat, and I know you'll enjoy this question, Jerry. LSV wants to know what was in your wish board for Vivian.
Literally nothing.
Actually, nothing.
I had two thrashing Brontodons that were in my sideboard.
Right.
Actually, in 7 rounds, I lost playing for top eight. I went 5-2. In 7 rounds, I -5'd Vivian exactly one time.
Okay. I've never -5 Vivian in all my time with the Green Black Adventures deck. And maybe that's a leak. Maybe I've just missed it a few times. But it's crazy how rare it's the best option and how often you're incentivized to just deal with the battlefield as opposed to going to your sideboard.
Well, so you play Vivian, you take it up to 5. Presumably, you're doing something rad with the counters, getting in for some damage, whatever. And then you get to untap with your Vivian still at 5. What do you need to wish for? What is going on in that game?
Your wishes have been fulfilled already via Vivian.
Right. At that point, it's like, okay, more counters, like Questing Beast is going to get in there, or you -3 to kill something. Like, those are almost certainly better than just -5, like, throw away my Vivian, search for a creature. So it very, very rarely came up.
I also see chat now talking about Epic Downfall, and that is a card you've been super high on in your list for a while now, and I think it's gotten even more important with this ban.
Yeah, I played 2 Epic Downfalls main. That was a Felix Slew innovation, and I think that was one of the things that sort of helped Simic, where it like gave you a way to answer Wicked Wolf, but it really doesn't have that many targets in their deck other than that. So it is kind of awkward, but it was very nice just as a 2-mana removal spell. You basically always trade up on mana, right? I mean, if you are using it to kill a Golos, that kind of sucks because they already got a Field of the Dead, maybe some zombies, whatever, but you are still getting a pretty huge mana advantage, and you're getting this 5 toughness thing out of the way. And that version of Golgari Adventures was very much about board position, and that's all you really cared about.
Right. I think that's a deck that needs to go back to the drawing board, one that still has potential, but it has to think about what exactly it's trying to accomplish in this new format. And being a dog to the Simic decks is not the place I want to start.
Nope.
I don't know if that's fixable, though. Like, it may just be fundamentally what you do does not line up well against what they do. And if that's the case, you better make sure those other matchups are really good. And you better make sure they exist as well. So as far as a week 1 deck, not super sold on green-black as it stands.
No, me either. It is very much a metagame deck. Like, you have to be able to tune the cards in your deck to line up well against what everyone else is doing. And, you know, my main deck had, like, 2 Legion's Ends, 2 Epic Downfalls, and 2 Okame Adversaries main, which is, like, a good card and is going to be a good card in this new format, absolutely. But, you know, say I have those slots that are very narrow and targeted at certain things, and people show up with, like, fires or whatever. It's like, okay, yeah, this is not going to do anything. So the Green Black Adventures deck to some degree can stand up alone just on power level because of how good Edgewall Innkeeper is, but there are those slots that just kind of make or break you, which is like your interaction. So yeah, I would probably just wait on that because I don't think it's a good week 1 deck. Like, oh, I'm just going to show up, play these like powerful cards or whatever and beat everyone. If you wanted to do that, just play Simic.
Totally agree. Maybe you could slant things to just be more aggressive. Like maybe you're a... Man, now I'm blanking on that card as well. It's been too long since I played anything other than Oko. Spawn of Mayhem, Questing Beast, more aggressive, lean to your deck. I think that has some potential for week 1, but still unlikely to be the best option, I'm pretty sure.
So I was looking at some Magic Online deck lists. They just posted a standard league in VTCLA 5-0'd with a green-black, like, Pelt Collector, Spawn of Mayhem deck. And that might actually just be a better place to be than Edgewall Innkeeper, or maybe you can splice the two, I don't know. But something like that is certainly viable. I mean, like, Black does have a lot of very powerful threats, and I would like to say you can't Oko them all, but maybe you can.
Yeah, you might be able to. It's pretty low cost to just +1 your Planeswalker a bunch of times and deal with every single problematic card.
Yeah, but, I mean, Spawn is very powerful, might be able to not get tagged by Wicked Wolf immediately if they don't have a Goose or don't have Oko, and then you have Rankle, which has haste, you have a bunch of spot removal spells, a bunch of 1-drops that can also pressure early, so if you get to go like 1-drop, 2-drop Spawn, and their response is Oko, 3/3 your Spawn, I mean, you're still doing okay. You probably get to attack their Oko down and still keep up the pressure and everything. So I'm definitely more interested in versions like that if you are trying to beat Simic. Like, I would want to add Knight of the Ebon Legion into the mix and maybe go back to the older versions that were like almost mono black, splashing Swordmaster with Smitten Swordmaster, or splashing Innkeeper, but playing the Smitten Swordmaster stuff.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. More aggressive lean is always nice when you're dealing with what is essentially a new format.
Yeah.
So Field of the Dead gone, and Field of the
Yep.
Dead, one of the poles of the format. It was the way to go big. Everything folded in the face of a Field of the Dead that was able to do its thing.
Well,
But
you're the go big master. So what do we got?
so there is one card in particular that I think best facilitates these go huge strategies. It is Fires of Invention, a card that again I think people were probably said the B word about during the first week.
Yeah.
People were very scared of Fires of Invention. That hasn't quite come to fruition. There were obviously the Fires Golos decks. There was Savage playing the Fires Planeswalkers decks. But I think now is the time these decks can start thinking about what they want to accomplish. And there's the traditional way of doing it. There is either, obviously Golos is gone now, but there is the Planeswalker approach, like Savage played, which I think is a deck that has a lot of potential. I like that it plays a good game without fires. That's pretty appealing to me.
Yep.
There's a list that goes back very, very early on in the format, and I don't know if it was Zach Allen's or if he was just working with people on it, but it's essentially fires Planeswalkers Grixis, leveraging Bolus, and also playing Elder Spell to just have like a combo kill out of nowhere, which I thought was a really, really cool setup and kind of underexplored thus far.
Yeah, you told me in Philly, so Hunter Crott, top 16
Correct.
with his team, and it's Grixis splashing to Fairy Time Raveler, so 26 non-basics, and 2 Elder Spells main, and yeah, you told me that Zach Allen designed the deck, and he looked at it like an Elder Spell combo deck, and after playing some games with the deck, I totally got that impression too.
Yeah.
Where you do the normal thing where you're like, all right, thought erasure you, kill your thing, play some planeswalkers, play fires, play some more planeswalkers, and that can take a while to actually close the game, and especially against things like Golos, like they would eventually just go over the top of you. So having this Elder Spell that you could find in your deck with Drawn from Dreams and stuff like that, and just eventually ult your Bolus or whatever to just end the game on the spot was very good.
I'm into that deck, and I want to look at that and explore it, and I think the version that Hunter played in that open looked very unrefined, which is fine. I mean, week one, that's not me trashing the deck. That's the reality of a week one deck. But that gives me hope because that seems like there's a lot of space to maybe refine that idea and get something out of it. The thing I am presently working on, though, and it should come as no surprise that I am unwilling to give up playing a bunch of lands and a Boreal Grazer and Growth Spiral, and I do like fires, and now I have tried to figure out how I can combine the Fire Shell with a Gates Shell, because Gates Ablaze is still very, very effective at cleaning up everything that ails you, these Nissa battlefields, and I'm interested in that card.
Oh, I've done this already.
You've already done Fires Gates? Yeah. Okay, so now when there's Field of the Dead, there's no reason to do this. This is nonsense, like utter nonsense.
I kind of disagree.
Okay, well that's interesting.
So when people were doing Fires Golos, and all of their lands were ETBing tapped anyway, I was like, well, why not just do Gates? That actually made a lot of sense to me. So I was trying that. Okay. But last night or the day before, I went through and kind of like, I deleted all my Golos decks because I'm like, this is just going to happen, right? And I fixed some of my other decks. And I went into the Gates deck, removed the Goloses, removed the Field of the Deads. And yeah, just the thing that got me was Fires of Invention plus Guild Summit.
Yes.
Where you're not casting it anymore,
Nope.
so you just get to put it into play and draw 5 cards or whatever.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, so my list right now, there's not like a good way to like screen share this, is there?
No, I don't have access to that, unfortunately. You can leave it in the description or the comments to the YouTube video. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, of course. So I'm just going to read it off. My list right now is 4 Grazer, 4 Fae of Wishes, Vomit, 4 Once Upon a Time, 4 Growth Spiral, 3 Guild Summit, 4 Gates Ablaze, 4 Fires, 4 Circuitous Route, 1 Archway Angel, 28 lands total. The composition matters a little bit. And then I have a Guild Summit in the board to wish for, 4 Aether Gust, 4 Gatebreaker Ram. I wanted to try the Gatebreaker Ram with like Kenrith as a mirror breaker against Golos and stuff, and was like, oh, this could be a good like sideboard thing to bring in as a juke, and then it just kept getting OHKO'd. as it does. So
Right.
I don't know if I actually want to keep those or not, but they are very big. They're pretty powerful. And then the win condition I decided on was just Fae of Wishes for Jace because it's easier to do that and like deck yourself with multiple guild summits than it is to do any sort of Kenrith setup or anything like that.
Word, I do not have a Jace in my sideboard, but that makes a lot of sense to me. I will go ahead and add that right now. So I didn't play Once Upon a Time in my deck, which like might just be egregious given how powerful that card is, and it's completely undeniable. But also,
You don't,
your hits aren't that good.
yeah, you don't have a lot of hits. I just wanted more ways to hit Grazer because
Right.
I felt like with Guild Summit and what the deck is doing, you don't care about having like card advantage necessarily. You just need to accelerate to 4 mana.
What was your sweeper package? Did you just have the 4 Gates Ablaze?
Yeah, just 4 Gates Ablaze and then Clarion and a Planar Cleansing to wish for.
And did you have Hydroid Crisis as well?
Nah,
Okay.
you could. I just felt like with 4 Fae and Guild Summit, you would just eventually be able to get that going.
Yeah, I have Crisis now, but now that you mention that, it seems like maybe you just don't need it. Maybe it's overkill. Yeah, I think this deck has a lot of promise, and we're apparently both interested in it, which is not what I expected. But I think day one, I start playing Dance, see how that does. After I get inevitably crushed by Tamio or some nonsense, this is where I think I'm going to turn my attention, because finding the poles of the format is, number one, what I'm good at, number two, what I like doing, number three, has potential to yield some very, very serious results. So if you can find a way to just be bigger than everyone else, you get paid. And I think this is an interesting start. And I actually started down this road with like a Tamio Flood of Tears deck, and somehow it evolved to this place. But I think
Sure.
Tamio Flood of Tears may also have potential as well. I think the issue was I didn't have a way to clean up Nissa land, so I was like,
Right.
oh, I'll just play Gates Ablaze. And then once I had Gates Ablaze, it just started warping out of control pretty quickly to get away from the Tamio core.
Yeah, Planar Cleansing has a lot of the same issues where it cleans up so much against the food decks, but just the Nissa lands, they're so tough to deal with.
Right. So maybe there's just like a Tamio time wipe type of setup that you can leverage really well. Time will tell if Flood of Tears will ever get its moment.
Yeah, I
Standard.
just don't think you can really do that because eventually they will, replay their Crisis enough or whatever that they find a disdainful stroke, and then
Right.
you just can't keep doing that sort of setup in perpetuity. Like Esper Dance will actually just like grind them into dust and then kill them, which is why I think that setup actually works. And Gates can kind of do the same thing too. You have Guild Summit going and you just wipe their board over and over again.
Sure.
Uh, Anything that is just trying to like go over the top, but then also keep playing the game, I feel like Simic is eventually going to find a way to maneuver out of.
Probably true. Yeah, someone in chat pointed out Tamio Flood gets housed by a questing beast. That seems pretty accurate to me. All these haste creatures are pretty problematic for the deck. So a lot of flaws with that whole strategy, and probably why I ultimately ended up on this Gates approach. We'll see if we can make this one work instead.
Yeah, what about Team or Reclamation?
I don't know. I mean, it seem like that deck should be good. Like, there's all the power points, there's new prints that it's picked up, and I played a bit with Team of Reclamation. It was fine, and then as soon as my opponent plays a Teferi, I'm like, what am I doing here? Why did I even think this could be viable? Your counterplay options are so bad, so limited, and at the time of Field of the Dead, you again still had the outscale problem, because Field of the Dead, while it could go late, it could also assemble its stuff on like turn 7, and explosioning them for 8 in the mid game doesn't really do a whole lot. You need to deal with their battlefield as well. So now that maybe you can focus on a more combo-centric approach, I guess, and just try and ignore everything that's going on, you can get there. But how can you really ignore things like Oko, which generate battlefield presence so quickly, and Nissa, and those cards appearing on turns 2, turns 3? I just don't know if you can play a card that doesn't immediately impact the battlefield like Wilderness Reclamation.
No, I mean this is a deck that can very easily main deck Aether Gust, and I think handles a lot of the problems that you're talking about.
Okay.
And for Rec against Golos, I think it was actually good against it because you had Flame Sweep to just buy you like those 3 turns or whatever.
I think it was okay. I mean, it depends what we mean by good. Like, the matchup was acceptable, unlike a lot of decks which didn't have an acceptable matchup.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a fail rate with Reclamation, right? Like, you can clean up their battlefield and draw some cards, but if you don't actually find Reclamation to make your explosions good enough, then you would eventually just lose. But given like both players doing their thing, I think it was very easy for Reclamation to win.
Okay.
But as yeah, Reclamation against Simic, I mean, you're good against their plan A, but once they start having some actual counterplay, if they have things like Brazen Borrower or Disdainful Stroke, whatever, like things start getting a lot tougher, right?
I think that's exactly right. Brazen Borrower is a card whose stock should go up in the present format, I believe. If I'm talking about Esper as a potential counterplay option to Simic, the card I feared the most as Esper was actually Brazen Borrower. Their ability to time walk you after you play a Doom Foretold, extremely problematic. And those slots that were taken up by like the 4 Disdainful Strokes, I see them moving to Brazen Borrower and just giving the deck a way to close games even more quickly than it already does. It doesn't need to go long anymore. It could just be a tempo style deck, close out the game in the first 6-7 turns or so.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I think that for the most part, those plans are just weaker in mirrors.
Okay.
But if you do have things like Dance and Team Erect to contend with, which I think you will, then Borrower is very good.
Okay, so maybe that's a week 2, week 3 setup before you, when you let the metagame settle down a little bit, where it's not just people jamming Oko as the next.
No, no. I mean, I was fine with just like playing 2 Borrowers in Simic. I think that that's like a fine catch-all, and it allows you to play some tempo-y games when you draw that subset of cards if you want to. Like it does give you that option, whereas maybe before without it you wouldn't have that option. But yeah, just as a way to actually interact with Doom Foretold, maybe Priest of Forgotten Gods, just like all the random stuff, Fires too. I mean, I do think it's a reasonable inclusion.
Okay. So what else you got for us? Anything else you're eyeballing during these early days of New Standard?
Got to talk about Embercleave, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knights did pretty well in the tournament, actually.
Mm-hmm. No, I think Knight's putting up a solid win percentage, given the fact that it had kind of completely fallen off the radar. Your Knight setup presently black-red? Is it Mardu? Is it Grixis, which you were high on for a minute?
It is black-red something. Grixis, I think, was slightly better when you could kind of bank on your opponent not having a lot of actual setup. Like if you get to play Scions on a mostly empty board and they're just trying to hide behind like 1 or 2 things, then it's actually good. But when you're playing against Simic and they like Wicked Wolf you and then you play a Scions, like that thing's just going to die, right? Like you would rather just play Mardu, like rebuild, have a bunch of different creatures. But as far as like setting up different Death Touch Trample combinations, I think Grixis is pretty good.
Okay.
So I think I would start with Mardu, but can keep Grixis in your back pocket if you want.
Okay. I will probably keep neither of these in my back pocket because this is pretty far from what I generally look to do in Magic. But
yeah,
if it is best, you can send me in that direction.
So Mardu Knights, 54% win percentage overall, 33% 1-3 against Bant Ramp, and 71% against Simic Food out of 7 matches.
Sounds promising.
And then lost.
Do you find that surprising that it was able to fare that well against Simic Food?
Kinda, but I do think it is very polarizing whether or not they draw Wicked Wolf.
Okay.
And Simic doesn't have a whole lot else going on in the matchup aside from that. Like obviously Oko is very good, right? But Wicked Wolf is basically the only card that matters.
Fair enough.
So I still like Embercleave. I don't know the best home for it. It could end up being Mono Red or Rakdos or Knights or something like that.
This doesn't have anything to do with that huge stack of Embercleaves you tweeted out this morning, does it?
It was last night, and
okay.
and no, I still have those. I will sell them at some point. I don't think their price is going down, and I'm not greedy. If the price stays at $17 or whatever it's at now, I'm fine with that.
I think that's probably a good way to go about speculation. Leave the last 10% for someone else?
Yeah, I'm down for that.
Mm-hmm. Or they also say about speculation, give your friends some Embercleaves so they don't have to buy them. I'm just saying. I think that's a pretty well-established rule.
Do you not have any Embercleaves?
I don't have any Embercleaves now.
Yeah, dude, I got a playset for you.
Nice, I'm excited.
Yeah, no, they're $17.50. I paid $3 for them. Like, I don't care, man. I'm happy taking my win.
That's a steal. Good stuff.
It's not about trying to get rich and like maximize equity. It's just like I'm gonna sell these to a vendor or on eBay or something. That money's gonna go in my pocket. I'm gonna book it as a win, and then I'm going to use that money to help forget about all the L's that I don't post about.
Right.
So
It's so funny. Like I don't even cash out half the time I make these speculations, but I'm very excited about them. Like I'm
right.
so happy I got it right, but then I don't actually realize any gains, and I just talk about how I got them right.
Well, you get some of them right, and that's all that matters.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Well, like talking about gains, when Michael Majors went to Wizards of the Coast, I inherited his Magic collection,
Okay.
and this guy is actually just the king of not selling his specs.
I have seen some of these cards in your collection before, and the stack of bygone bishops you presently possess, nobody should have that many bygone bishops.
It's over 200,
Right.
for sure.
Right.
And he also has a lot of Smuggler's Copters and a lot of Aetherworks marbles. And now those Aetherworks marbles.
So what you're saying is Michael Majors did this just for you. He made sure they would start this format so you would finally get paid on those Smuggler's Copters and Aetherworks marbles.
I don't think he cares.
Okay. It would be nice if he did. Throw a little going away present to you, Jerry.
No, if he did care, he would have given me the heads up. Instead, I was completely blindsided by this. But thankfully, I haven't sold any of my old cards, basically.
Same.
So I have all these dig through times and Deathrite Shamans and nonsense.
Yep, I just have piles of these cards sitting around. I'm very excited to go through them and see what kind of treasures I will find.
Yeah. All right. So what else? How do you feel about Dimir midrange? You're gonna poo poo all over this deck, aren't you?
I mean, what? I don't even know what this deck is. If it's anything like versions that existed very early on with like Vantress Gargoyle and Drown in the Lock, that deck was unplayable. Like unplayable.
Yeah.
Not
I'm
even
ready.
close.
I'm ready to try it. I'm ready to try it and just get bodied by Oko.
You will absolutely get bodied. There is a video on our YouTube page of me playing that deck, and it was mostly very painful. Although I do think I went 2-1. But I didn't enjoy any of it, and none of it felt like wins I earned. Like there was one game where I drew like all 4 Drown in the Locks and just countered everything and won easily. And I was like, wow, that didn't seem fair. Well, that doesn't happen. Don't say yeah. That's not your plan, is to draw 4 Drown in the Lock.
I mean, it's kind of the plan. You have Into the Story. Okay, so that list was very raw and unrefined, and I'm at a good place. Okay. I think I will have a Dimir mid-range hot fire list for y'all.
Good. I look forward to that. I mean, there's definitely angles that were closed off. Like, that's something I think of as completely closed off by Field of the Dead. How can that deck ever exist in that world? And you were playing, like, Lockmere Serpent because you have to. You have no choice. But I know you didn't want to play Lockmere Serpent.
No.
I know that hurt you way down inside.
Yeah, it physically pained me.
Right.
The version I have still has a couple copies made. I don't think you need them, though.
Right.
I think they're just pretty bad.
Yeah, it was mostly to get through that wall of zombies, and now you have other reasonable plays, and you can actually play a game that goes multiple turns and not just get closed out immediately by Field of the Dead.
Into the Story is tight, though.
It is. It's a powerful spell. I mean, presumably modern playable.
Well, yeah, it's definitely modern playable.
Right.
People in chat are calling you out for playing poorly with the Dimir deck.
I play poorly with every deck. Come on. Why do we have to focus just on the Dimir deck? If you were watching me stream, I am playing poorly. I don't know what to tell you.
That's not true, man.
No, it is. Look, the dexterity to both have a conversation and be entertaining with my chat.
Oh, yeah.
And go ahead and play a good game. I don't have that. I don't even have anything close to that. It's if you're coming by, I want you to be interested in the ideas. I want you to enjoy yourself, have a good conversation. But if you think you're going to see top-notch play out of me, it's just not going to happen.
I agree with you that is very hard. And
I think people underestimate it.
No, they do, for sure. I was mostly taking issue because I just assumed that you were saying like you are bad in general, and I was like, well, that is not
fine.
true.
I'm fine.
Yeah. But that video, I watched it. I remember that. It was I've seen better.
Little
I've seen
dicey
better,
along the way. I'm with you. I've also seen better.
I'll teach you how to Vantress Gargoyle.
Okay.
What about Is It? Do you feel like this is like one of the shells that just loses to Oko, basically, like any sort of Ironcrag Pyromancer setup?
Yeah. I mean, you're very reliant on your creatures to be more than Elks, right? Anytime you need your creatures to be more than Elks, it feels like just don't do it. Don't go down that road right now. And maybe that means you're supposed to lean on Improbable Alliance. Is that the name of the card? The draw 2 effect? Like, that card's underwhelming, but if Oko has a weakness, it can't target enchantments. So you kind of find this one way you can preserve your interaction and do something that Oko can't account for, but making this very ineffectual stream of 1/1s over a bunch of turns doesn't seem like the way to get ahead of these decks. And I don't see a lot of angles for this deck to really push on.
Castle Embereth, baby.
Sure. Now you have
That's the
ineffectual
stuff.
2/1s over a bunch of turns instead. So if you're
Yeah.
excited about that, go for it.
Uh, there are like the is it like counterburn or flash decks? I know that that was like another one of the decks that you played with, right?
That deck was okay. It really
Yeah.
was like acceptable. Um, and it also did feel like it had a Field of the Dead problem. And probably a lot of the way that deck was built was in contemplation of Field of the Dead.
Right, and not Simic, really.
Right. So if you've played against these Simic Flash decks or the Izzet Flash decks, you know they are capable of just closing you out of the game and preventing you from doing anything reasonable. And maybe you play more copies of Mystical Dispute in the main because you're accounting for those early Oko starts.
Yeah,
And
you get to play Dispute and Gust.
yeah, it could be something. That deck didn't feel that far off, quite frankly.
Cool. All right. Yeah, so I'm gonna be working on these crappy blue decks, I think.
Nice.
It's time to bring Opt back, you know?
Love me an Opt. It's probably not time to bring it back, but I wish you the best of luck in your quest, and I hope you find something cool and blue for me to play.
Thank you. Get Smart also points out that Sorcerer Spyglass is a clean solution to Oko and Nissa. And I have this notepad file open, right, where it's just this list of decks that I wanted to talk about. And then there is a single card name, Sorcerer Spyglass, and then there is another list of Pioneer decks that I started making before the show or like during the show. So yeah, Spyglass, definitely a good thing. Thank you for reminding me that that is a talking point because this is a card that is seeing virtually zero play, and there are enough decks that struggle with Oko where this isn't even like the worst thing, right? Like normally it's like, oh, I want this to stop their Teferi or something, and you play it and they don't have a Teferi, and it's like, oh, well, they don't have any other good names. Well, Simic actually has a ton of good names where you actually don't mind flooding on these.
Yeah, the thing I'm doing while we're putting together this show is working on my article for this week, and finally some of my decks have started including Sorcerer's Spyglass in the sideboard. It just seems like it's time. It probably was time before this, but there were a lot of decks I was blank against. There was a lot of sideboard space being eaten up by Field of the Dead. Now some of
Right.
these decks can reclaim that space, and Sorcerer's Spyglass seems like a fine place to start.
Yeah. So that's in decks that could otherwise not handle Oko, or for things like the mono black deck where it's like, yes, they have Murder Shredder, they have Noxious Grasp, all this stuff, but realistically you want to be able to like play that, then play Rotting Regisaur, and then not get it Oko'd.
Right.
And if you're trying to do like Embercleave setups and stuff like that, I mean, it just like protects your big thing and allows Embercleave to be lethal. Obviously, it's not what you want to be doing on turn 2 or whatever. But
That's my problem with it there. But there's a bunch of other decks, though, that play like either a larger game, like something like Rotting Regisaur, where I think you're just like a one-card kill, or
Yeah.
they're more towards the middle. Something like Green-Black Adventures should probably look into a card like Sorcerer's Spyglass, I think.
yeah, I could see it. But yeah, I mean, so if you're mono black or Rakdos, something like that, and your plan against Simic is probably going to be to cut a bunch of the smaller creatures anyway, because they're going to be making like 3/3 foods. They're going to be making foods that gain them life. They're going to have Wicked Wolf to like eat your smaller things, and you're just going to try and like Rotting Regisaur, Spot of Mayhem, rankle them. I think Spyglass is a good preemptive way to actually make sure that your stuff sticks.
Right there with you.
All right, Rakdos Sack, you want to talk about Emma's PTQ top 8?
I will say that I have so much respect for the way Emma approaches PTQ. She's just crushing them. She top eights every single PTQ, and she does so with like basically a new list every time, usually something with her influence all over it. And I think for this particular MCQ she top eighted, she found a really unique way to pressure the format that nobody was accounting for. There's probably more space to account for it right now. You and I both super high on these Black Sacrifice decks, which is familiar. Which is Oven Cauldron familiar combinations. Yep. We've tried to death basically to make it work. I hope there's something here. Mayhem Devil was the card that basically Emma was splashing for, as well as Claim the Firstborn. And yeah. I love the Claim the Firstborn, which is Oven combo. That's a really, really cool setup. Not to mention all the Hydroid Krasis around. And
yep.
If we get back to a place where Hydra's seen play, Claim the Firstborn, a very powerful effect for 1 mana. So I hope this is something that works. I am not sold on it yet. but I will continue to try and make it come together.
Yeah, and if people want to see the list, you can check out her Twitter. She posted it. And the main innovation was basically just like cutting a lot of the red cards just down to Mayhem Devil and Claim the Firstborn, which is basically where I ended up too. I still wanted to play like a couple of copies of Light Up the Stage, but she had no Midnight Reapers and 4 Rankles and cannot play Light Up the Stage really with a bunch of Rankles in your deck. You know,
Sure.
I mean, they do it with Experimental Frenzy, but their curve is much lower in general. So I actually like her version of the deck a lot. I think it is very clean, and I just like stared at it, and it's just like, yeah, there's like not a lot I want to change. Like this is just kind of nice. And she was talking about how she was just farming green decks all day, and then in top 8 mulled to oblivion against another green deck. So if we're looking for things that hard target Simic, this might be it.
Nice. I will definitely check it out.
What else? What else you got for me?
That's about it. I think that sums up where I'm starting for this format. I've talked through all the decks I wanted to mention from my article that's coming up. Now it's just time to play games and figure out where things stand and figure out what the new face of this format is. And I think that it's interesting. And I don't think it's just about Oko. And I think there's room for us to play Magic and enjoy and brew and basically get a restart on our standard lives and not have this looming Field of the Dead just threatening to end the game out of nowhere after your opponent stalls out for 7 or 8 turns, and then all of a sudden there's 20 power on the battlefield. That's gone now. And let's figure out what the polls are. Let's figure out reasonable counterplay to Oko that was previously closed off by Field of the Dead, and then we might just have an interesting format on our hands.
Well, I will say that this standard does feel like it's about Oko. I'm looking at this list of decks and I'm like, these are all decks. They're all fine, but just the sheer card quality in Simic or Bant, whatever you want to say, it's rares all down the line, and they're all very, very good. You could compare basically any card in Simic to the relative power level of, like, you know, is Gilded Goose the best 1-drop? Is Paradise Druid the best 2-drop? Is Oko the best 3-drop? And it's like, I think Simic wins a lot of that.
Sure. And I said that week 1 when I saw Brad's deck for Fandom, and immediately it was like, the card quality in this deck is absolutely bonkers. That remains true. But if we just had to find the best cards, this would be pretty easy, right? You find the best card on rate, jam them together, and that's it. So that's the job now. Figure out the best way to interact with these cards.
Yeah, so Simic and Oko, the format is very much about them, but we went through a laundry list of decks where it's like, oh, I could see this actually being pretty good. So I do think that there is hope. I don't think that we'll have an Oko ban in 2 weeks or 3 months or whenever it is. I do think the format has the tools to actually churn now, which is great. And I just encourage people to actually get out there and try various things.
Agreed.
You know, because if I know a lot of people are going to be like playing ladder, playing in tournaments, looking at top 8s and being like, oh, you know, there's 5 Oko decks in this top 8. But if you are just resigning yourself to playing it and not actually trying to figure out how to beat it, you know, you're kind of part of the problem, right? You're just perpetuating this information cascade about Oko being like the only thing in the format, whereas people like Ken Yukihiro, Javier Dominguez, like all these people showed up to MC5 with decks that were not Golos, not Simic, actually did pretty well. It is possible.
Yep, they found solutions, and you can find solutions too. We will be working to find solutions. We will be working to explore our new format as well. We're going to come back and do Pioneer later this afternoon. We just do another live cast this afternoon.
Yeah, I think that works. I'm going to go get some food and everything. Probably think about some decks and deck lists and kind of what the format looks like and everything. So need to do a little prep work, but then I'm going to be ready. Yeah.
Okay.
You want to say like 3 p.m., like a little under 3 hours from now?
3 p.m. sounds absolutely perfect. And I'm going to put most of the workload on you for this one, Gerald, because I have to finish my standard article. So I will not have time to go deep on Frontier in the meantime. So I'm counting on you to come back and tell us exactly what we're supposed to be doing in this Pioneer format.
Word. So, huh?
You're my guide.
Oh, okay. So for people in the chat who are still with us, thank you for watching. If you want to tweet at me with any sort of Pioneer deck list or what you think the pillars of the format will be, or even just like a list of the best possible cards, that would help me. So if you want to do that, that would be cool. I know a lot of people already posted a bunch of stuff at the beginning of the show. That was very helpful. I appreciate it. And for the folks watching us on YouTube, Brian, you want to give them the spiel?
Yeah, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you were enjoying the Arena Decklist content showing up on YouTube, the best thing you can do for us is just let people know. Response continues to be tremendous. We broke 5,000 subscribers already on YouTube, and we've been at it for like less than a month. We have over 1.2 million minutes watched on YouTube. I am so blown away by large numbers. That's all it takes to fascinate me. And 1.2 million minutes watched sounds preposterous to me.
Yeah, but then you compare it to someone else.
Oh, come on. You can't live your life. There's always going to be someone who has more than
I'm
you.
I'm just curious, like what the people. So like I was poking around YouTube. Jim Davis has 25,000 subscribers, for example.
Jim is great. He's better than us.
No, I know. I'm just saying. And he has like a bunch of videos. I wonder how many minutes watched he has, because you like big numbers, right? It's going to be like 11 trillion minutes. It's just going to blow your mind.
Well, I like the big numbers when they relate to what I'm working on, though. That's the only
Word.
reason I
Okay,
find
fair enough.
this particular number exciting. But yes, thank you everyone for supporting and enjoying. And like we said, we'll be back approximately 3 p.m. ish this afternoon, 3 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you. So about 2.5, 3 hours from now. Sound good?
I like it.
Sign us out.
That's game.
There you go. That was so. That's game. That's game.